Tyler Brooks wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished his morning PT routine at Fort Braxton. At 26, he was the kind of soldier who lived and breathed the Army. Disciplined, loyal, and ambitious. His grandfather had served in Korea, his father in Vietnam, and Tyler carried that legacy like a badge of honor across his chest. The morning sun cast long shadows across the parade ground as Tyler checked his watch. Carla would be waiting at their usual spot by the commissary, probably with coffee and that smile that made his stomach flip every time. They'd been together for 3 years, engaged for 6 months, and Tyler had never been more certain about anything in his life. Carla Mitchell was everything Tyler thought he wanted in a wife. Beautiful, intelligent, and seemingly supportive of his military career, she worked as a civilian contractor on base, handling logistics coordination, a job that put her in contact with officers of all ranks. Tyler had met her during a supply chain audit, and their relationship had blossomed from professional respect to deep affection. "You're going to make general someday," Carla would tell him during their evening walks around the base. "I can see it in you, Tyler." That hunger, that drive. Tyler believed her because he wanted to. His promotion to sergeant had come early, and his performance reviews were exemplary. He'd completed his bachelor's degree through the Army's education program and was eyeing officer candidate school. The plan was simple. Marry Carla, continue climbing the ranks, and build the kind of military family legacy that made his father proud. But Tyler's ambition went deeper than ranks and ribbons. Growing up as the son of a career NCO, he learned early that respect was earned through action, not words. His father, Master Sergeant Robert Brooks, had been a hard man who showed love through lessons about honor, duty, and the price of weakness. A man who can't protect what's his doesn't deserve to have it. His father had told him this before deploying to Iraq for the final time. Tyler was 16 then, watching his father's convoy disappear into the distance. 3 months later, an IED took Robert Brooks and 2 other soldiers. Tyler had enlisted the day after graduation, carrying his father's dog tags and his unwavering belief that strength was the only currency that mattered. As he walked toward the commissary, Tyler noticed the unusual amount of activity around the command building. Staff cars were parked in neat rows, and soldiers moved with the crisp efficiency that only came when high-ranking visitors were present. Colonel Rick Sutherland's black sedan was prominently displayed near the main entrance. Sutherland was a West Point graduate, 15 years Tyler's senior, with a combat record that included 2 tours in Afghanistan and a Bronze Star. He was everything Tyler aspired to become: confident, decorated, and politically savvy. The colonel had taken notice of Tyler's work, even mentioning him favorably during staff meetings. Tyler had begun to hope that Sutherland might become a mentor. Tyler found Carla waiting by their usual table, but something was different. She fidgeted with her engagement ring, turning it around her finger in a nervous gesture he'd never seen before. Her usual bright smile was replaced by something that looked almost apologetic. "You look beautiful today," Tyler said, leaning down to kiss her cheek. She turned slightly, so his lips barely brushed her skin. "Tyler, we need to talk." The words hit him like a physical blow. In his experience, conversations that started with those words never ended well. He sat down across from her, noting how she couldn't quite meet his eyes. "Is everything okay? You seem—" "I've been thinking about us," Carla interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. "About our future, about what I really want." Tyler felt something cold settle in his chest. "What do you mean?" Carla finally looked up, and Tyler saw something in her eyes that he'd never seen before: a hardness, a calculation that made her seem like a stranger. I mean that I'm not sure we're right for each other anymore. The commissary buzzed with the usual morning activity, but Tyler felt as if they were sitting in complete silence. Carla, if this is about the deployment schedule, it's not about deployments, Tyler. It's about reality. Her voice grew stronger, more confident. You're a good man, but you're not going where I need to go. I don't understand. Carla twisted the engagement ring one final time, then slipped it off her finger and placed it on the table between them. I'm sorry, Tyler. I really am. Tyler stared at the ring on the table, its diamond catching the fluorescent lights of the commissary. Around them, soldiers and their families continued their normal routines, oblivious to the fact that Tyler's world was collapsing. There's someone else, Carla said. And though Tyler had suspected it from the moment she'd started speaking, hearing it confirmed felt like taking shrapnel. Who? The word came out as barely more than a whisper. Carla straightened her shoulders, and Tyler saw a flash of something that might have been pride. Colonel Sutherland. Tyler's hand clenched into a fist on the table. Of all the possible answers, this was the one that cut deepest. Not just because it was his commanding officer, not just because it made him look like a fool in front of the entire base, but because it confirmed something Tyler had never wanted to admit about himself. That despite all his training, all his discipline, he was still not enough. How long? Tyler's voice was steady, controlled. His father had taught him never to show weakness, especially when he was bleeding. 3 months. Carla's answer was matter-of-fact, almost clinical. It started during the supply audit review meetings. He's different than you, Tyler. He's going places, real places. Tyler absorbed this information as he'd been trained to process battlefield intelligence, compartmentalizing the emotional impact, focusing on the facts. 3 months meant it had started before his last promotion, before he'd started making plans for their wedding, before he'd put down a deposit on the off-base apartment they were going to share. You could have told me sooner. I didn't want to hurt you. The irony of that statement wasn't lost on Tyler, but he didn't point it out. Instead, he studied Carla's face, memorizing details he'd somehow missed before. The way her eyes flickered toward the command building when she thought he wasn't looking. The subtle but expensive watch she was wearing. Definitely not something she could afford on her contractor salary. And the slight thin line where a different ring had recently been. He proposed. Carla nodded, and for the first time since the conversation began, she looked genuinely uncomfortable. Last week, Tyler. I know this is hard, but congratulations. Tyler picked up the engagement ring he'd saved for 6 months to buy and slipped it into his pocket. I hope you'll be very happy together. Carla blinked, clearly caught off guard by his calm response. Tyler, I hope we can still be friends. I mean, we'll be seeing each other around base. No, Tyler said quietly, standing up from the table. We won't. As he walked away, Tyler heard Carla call his name, but he didn't turn around. He had learned long ago that looking back was a luxury that soldiers couldn't afford. But as he made his way across the base, Tyler made a promise to himself, one that would have made his father proud. He would never forget this feeling. He would never forgive this betrayal. And someday, when he had the power to do something about it, he would make them both pay. The next few days passed in a blur of routine and careful observation. Tyler noticed things he'd been too trusting to see before. The way Colonel Sutherland's aide had been rearranging schedules to accommodate private meetings. The way certain supply contracts had been expedited without proper documentation. the way Carla had access to information that should have been classified above her clearance level. Tyler's immediate supervisor, Sergeant First Class Danny Kowalski, pulled him aside after morning formation. "Brooks, I know this is a tough situation, but you're handling it like a professional. That's what separates the real soldiers from the weekend warriors." Tyler appreciated Kowalski's support, but he also recognized it as a warning. The entire base knew about Carla and the colonel by now. Tyler's reaction was being watched and evaluated. One wrong move, one moment of lost control, and his career would be over. "Thank you, Sergeant. I'm focusing on my duties." "Good man. Keep your head down. Do your job, and this will blow over. There are plenty of fish in the sea." But Tyler wasn't interested in fishing. He was interested in hunting. 6 weeks after Carla's betrayal, Tyler received his orders for advanced leadership training at Fort Leavenworth. It was an opportunity that could fast-track his path to officer status. But Tyler suspected Colonel Sutherland's influence behind the assignment. Better to have him out of sight while the colonel consolidated his new relationship. Tyler didn't mind. Distance would give him perspective, and perspective would give him power. The night before his departure, Tyler sat in his empty barracks room, writing in the journal his father had given him before that final deployment. It was something Robert Brooks had learned in Vietnam. A soldier needed to record not just what happened, but how it made him feel. "Feelings are intelligence," his father had written in the journal's first entry. "Ignore them, and you'll make the same mistakes twice." Tyler wrote carefully, documenting not just the events of the past month, but his analysis of Colonel Sutherland's methods, Carla's motivations, and the base politics that had made their affair possible. He wrote about the casual corruption he'd observed, the way influence and access were traded like commodities. Most importantly, he wrote about the cold clarity that had settled over him since that morning in the commissary. He was no longer the idealistic sergeant who believed that merit and hard work were enough, that Tyler Brooks had died with his engagement. The man who remained was something harder, more focused, and infinitely more dangerous. Fort Leavenworth was a revelation. The Advanced Leadership Training Program brought together the Army's most promising NCOs and junior officers, creating an environment of intense competition and networking. Tyler thrived in this atmosphere, quickly establishing himself as someone to watch. His roommate was a Marine Corps sergeant named Miguel Santos, a combat veteran with 3 deployments and a reputation for tactical brilliance. Santos had grown up in East LA, learning leadership in the streets before bringing those skills to the military. "You've got that look," Santos told Tyler during their second week. They were studying in their shared quarters, preparing for a complex tactical scenario. "What look?" "The look of a man with a mission. I've seen it before in guys who've been burned. Question is, what are you going to do about it?" Tyler considered his answer carefully. Santos was the kind of man who respected honesty but despised weakness. "I'm going to make myself indispensable to the right people. Then I'm going to collect on old debts." Santos grinned. "Now that's a plan I can respect. Just remember, revenge is a dish best served by someone with more power than the people who wronged you." The training pushed Tyler in ways he hadn't expected. Beyond the tactical and strategic curriculum, he learned about military politics, resource allocation, and the informal networks that really controlled Army operations. He discovered that the military, like any large organization, was ultimately about relationships and leverage. Tyler excelled in every aspect of the program, but he was particularly gifted at reading people and situations. His instructors noted his ability to identify key players, understand their motivations, and position himself advantageously. What they interpreted as natural leadership, Tyler recognized as something darker, the skills of a predator learning to hunt. During a field exercise simulating urban combat, Tyler's unit was tasked with extracting a high-value target from hostile territory. While other teams focused on speed and firepower, Tyler spent hours studying the intelligence reports, identifying patterns and weaknesses. His approach was methodical, patient, and utterly ruthless in its efficiency. His team achieved the objective with no casualties, while other units suffered significant losses. The exercise evaluator, a colonel named Patricia Hayes, pulled Tyler aside afterward. "Sergeant Brooks, that was exceptional tactical thinking. You have a gift for seeing the battlefield whole, not just your piece of it." Colonel Hayes was a rising star herself, a decorated combat veteran with advanced degrees from both West Point and Harvard, and rumors of assignment to the Pentagon. She was also, Tyler noted, everything that Carla had claimed to value in a partner: intelligent, ambitious, and unquestionably headed for general rank. "Thank you, ma'am. I believe in understanding the entire operational environment." "That's the kind of thinking that wins wars," Hayes said. "I'm going to remember you, Sergeant Brooks." As Tyler walked back to his quarters, he thought about Colonel Hayes's words. She was going to remember him. That was exactly what Tyler needed, to be remembered by the right people for the right reasons. 3 months into the program, Tyler received a letter from his old base. Sergeant Kowalski wrote that Colonel Sutherland and Carla had been married in a small ceremony attended by the base's senior staff. The colonel had been selected for promotion to full colonel and transfer to the Pentagon. Carla was moving with him, leaving her contractor position for something more suitable to an officer's wife. Tyler read the letter twice, then filed it carefully in his growing collection of intelligence. Sutherland was moving up, gaining influence and connections. Good. The higher they climbed, the farther they had to fall. That evening, Tyler wrote in his journal, "The enemy has revealed their position. Now I know where to find them." He closed his journal with a sense of purpose, determination burning brighter than ever. 2 years after completing the advanced leadership training, Tyler Brooks stood at attention in Colonel Patricia Hayes's Pentagon office, receiving his promotion to staff sergeant. But this ceremony was different from the usual base formalities. It was intimate, personal, and charged with significance that extended far beyond the addition of another chevron. "At ease, Staff Sergeant," Hayes said, her voice carrying the authority that came with her recent promotion to full colonel. "Close the door and have a seat." Tyler had been working as Hayes's senior NCO for 8 months, a position that had given him unprecedented access to high-level military planning and strategy. More importantly, it had allowed him to observe the intricate power dynamics that controlled military careers and policy. Hayes was exactly what Tyler had recognized her to be during that field exercise: a brilliant, tactical mind with the political instincts to navigate the Pentagon's treacherous waters. "You've exceeded every expectation I had when I requested your assignment," Hayes continued, settling behind her desk. "Your work on the logistics optimization project saved the Army $17 million and earned recognition from the Joint Chiefs." Tyler nodded, accepting the praise without false modesty. The logistics project had been his idea, a comprehensive review of supply chain inefficiencies that had identified systematic waste across multiple commands. But more than the cost savings, the project had given Tyler access to personnel files, financial records, and operational details from bases across the globe, including Fort Braxton, where Colonel Rick Sutherland had recently been assigned as deputy commander. "There's something else," Hayes said, her tone shifting to something more personal. I've been offered command of the 82nd Airborne Division. It's a fast track to general rank, but it means leaving the Pentagon. I want you to come with me as my command sergeant major." Tyler's pulse quickened, though his expression remained neutral. Command Sergeant Major of the 82nd Airborne was one of the most prestigious NCO positions in the Army. It would put him in direct contact with generals, Pentagon officials, and the kind of influential officers who shaped military policy. "Ma'am, I'm honored by your confidence, but I'm not sure I have the experience for such a responsibility." Hayes smiled, and Tyler caught a glimpse of something that might have been affection. Over the months they'd worked together, their professional relationship had evolved into something deeper. They shared late dinners while working on complex projects, discussed strategy during early morning runs around the Pentagon, and found themselves gravitating toward each other at social functions. "Tyler," she said, using his first name for only the second time since they'd known each other, "you have something more valuable than experience. You have vision. You see connections that other people miss. And you understand how to make systems work better." What Hayes interpreted as systems thinking, Tyler knew was really his growing expertise in finding leverage points, the places where pressure could be applied to achieve maximum effect. Every project he'd worked on, every analysis he'd completed, had taught him more about how power really flowed through the military hierarchy. When would this assignment begin? 6 months. That gives us time to prepare the transition, and for you to complete your professional military education requirements. Hayes leaned forward, her expression growing more serious. "Tyler, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." Tyler waited, sensing that this moment would define not just his career, but his entire future. "Are you involved with anyone? Romantically, I mean?" The question hung in the air between them. Tyler thought of Carla, of the morning she destroyed his naive faith in loyalty and love. He thought of the cold calculation in her eyes when she'd chosen rank over their relationship. Most of all, he thought of the promise he'd made to himself, that he would never again be vulnerable to that kind of betrayal. "No, ma'am, I'm not." Hayes nodded, as if confirming something she'd already suspected. "The reason I ask is that military couples at our level face unique challenges, the demands of command, the scrutiny, the political implications of every decision. It requires a very specific kind of partnership." Tyler understood what she was offering. Not just professional advancement, but a personal alliance that could reshape both their futures. Hayes was brilliant, ambitious, and absolutely committed to her military career. She was also, Tyler realized, someone who would never choose rank over loyalty, because she understood that real power came from building the right alliances. "Colonel, I want you to know that you have my complete loyalty and dedication in whatever capacity you feel is most appropriate." Hayes stood and walked to the window overlooking the Pentagon offices. "I've been watching you, Tyler. Not just your work, but how you think, how you respond to pressure. You're not like other NCOs. You don't just follow orders. You understand objectives and find ways to exceed them." Tyler joined her at the window, close enough to notice her perfume, something subtle and expensive that spoke of confidence rather than seduction. "What made you notice me initially?" Tyler asked. "Your tactical analysis during the urban combat exercise. But more than that, it was what you didn't do. You didn't grandstand, didn't try to make yourself look good at the expense of other teams. You just quietly achieved the objective with maximum efficiency. That told me you understood the difference between appearing powerful and actually being powerful." As they stood together, Tyler felt the pull of genuine attraction for the first time since Carla's betrayal, and it gave him hope that new beginnings were possible. But this was different, based on mutual respect, shared ambition, and a deep understanding of each other's capabilities. Hayes represented everything Tyler had learned to value: intelligence, strength, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. "Patricia," Tyler said, using her first name deliberately, "I want you to know that whatever develops between us, professionally or personally, will never compromise our mission or our responsibilities." She turned to face him, and Tyler saw something in her eyes that reminded him why he'd been drawn to military service in the first place: the recognition of finding someone who understood the weight of duty and the price of command. "I was hoping you'd say that," she replied with a quiet smile, "because I have a feeling we're going to change everything." 18 months later, Brigadier General Patricia Hayes married Staff Sergeant Tyler Brooks in a ceremony that made headlines in military publications across the country. The marriage of a general officer to an enlisted soldier was rare enough to be newsworthy, but the story of their professional partnership and mutual respect captured the imagination of a military community often divided by rigid hierarchy. Tyler had completed his officer training and was commissioned as a second lieutenant just weeks before the wedding, a progression that Hayes had carefully orchestrated to minimize political complications. The timing wasn't coincidental. Tyler's commission allowed their marriage to be seen as a union between officers rather than a breach of protocol. The ceremony took place at the old post chapel at Fort Myer, with an honor guard drawn from the 82nd Airborne and 3rd Infantry Regiment. Tyler's dress, blue uniform was perfect, his bearing impeccable. But what impressed the assembled military elite wasn't his appearance. It was his evident intelligence and quiet confidence. "Patricia's husband isn't what I expected," commented General William Morrison, the Army Chief of Staff, during the reception. "He's clearly more than just a pretty uniform." Tyler had spent months preparing for this moment, studying the careers and personalities of every senior officer who would attend their wedding. He understood that his marriage to Patricia had made him a figure of interest and scrutiny throughout the Army's upper echelons. During their honeymoon in Europe, Patricia shared intelligence that Tyler had been hoping to hear. "Rick Sutherland's been assigned to the Pentagon," she said as they walked along the Seine in Paris. "He's taking over the Strategic Planning Division. It's a significant promotion." Tyler nodded, processing this information with the same clinical attention he brought to all battlefield intelligence. Sutherland's rise had been predictable. He had the right connections, the appropriate combat experience, and the political instincts to navigate Pentagon politics. Tyler looked at Patricia, knowing that together they were poised to shape the future in ways neither Sutherland nor anyone else could anticipate. More importantly, Sutherland's assignment would put him in regular contact with Patricia, and by extension, Tyler. "What about his wife?" Tyler asked casually. "Carla? She's become quite the military spouse, involved in all the right organizations, very active in the Officers' Wives Club. From what I hear, she's gotten quite comfortable in her role as a colonel's wife." Tyler filed this information away with everything else he'd been collecting about his former fiancée and her husband. Carla had adapted to military life exactly as Tyler would have predicted, by learning to navigate social hierarchies and leveraging her position for maximum advantage. But what Carla and Sutherland didn't know was that Tyler had been tracking their careers with the systematic attention of a professional intelligence analyst. He knew about Sutherland's financial situation, his professional relationships, and his political vulnerabilities. More importantly, Tyler understood something that neither of them had realized, that in marrying Patricia Hayes, he had positioned himself to eventually control their future. 3 months after their return from Europe, Patricia received her promotion to Major General and assignment as Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations. The position made her one of the most powerful officers in the Army, with direct input on strategy, personnel decisions, and resource allocation. Tyler's own career had accelerated in parallel. His combination of tactical expertise and political awareness had earned him rapid promotions and increasingly significant responsibilities. As Patricia's husband, he had access to social and professional networks that would have taken decades to penetrate otherwise, but Tyler's most valuable asset wasn't his rank or connections. It was his ability to remain invisible while observing everything. Military society was built on clear hierarchies and formal protocols, which meant that Tyler could gather intelligence simply by being present at the right functions and listening to the right conversations. During a reception at the Army and Navy Club, Tyler found himself in conversation with Colonel David Chun, Sutherland's immediate supervisor in the Strategic Planning Division. "Your wife has quite a reputation," Chun mentioned, noting Patricia across the room as she discussed policy with the Secretary of the Army. "Word is, she's being considered for assignment to the Joint Chiefs." Tyler smiled modestly. "Patricia is extraordinarily talented. She sees strategic implications that other people miss. That's a valuable quality. Strategic planning requires the ability to anticipate how various factors will interact over time." Chun paused, then added, "Of course, it also requires understanding personality dynamics. Some of my officers are brilliant tactically, but struggle with the human element." Tyler recognized this as an opening to gather intelligence about Sutherland's performance and relationships within the Pentagon hierarchy, making sure every piece fit into the larger puzzle he was assembling. "I imagine that's particularly challenging when dealing with officers who have strong personalities or conflicting priorities," Tyler said. Chun nodded knowingly. "Exactly. Take Rick Sutherland, for example. Brilliant officer, decorated combat veteran, but he sometimes struggles with collaborative decision-making. He tends to see strategic planning as competition rather than coordination." Tyler filed this assessment away with everything else he'd learned about Sutherland's professional weaknesses. The colonel was politically ambitious, but tactically impatient, qualities that could be exploited by someone with sufficient patience and positioning. As the evening progressed, Tyler noticed Carla arriving with a group of other military spouses. She had changed significantly from the contractor he'd known at Fort Braxton. Her clothes were more expensive, her bearing more confident, and her social skills more polished. She moved through the reception with the practiced ease of someone who had learned to work a room. Tyler observed her interactions with scientific detachment, noting her techniques for gathering information and building relationships. Carla had clearly studied the art of military networking, understanding that a spouse's career could be as strategically important as an officer's combat record. When she finally noticed Tyler across the room, her reaction was everything he could have hoped for. Her face went pale, her confident smile faltered, and Tyler saw a moment of genuine fear in her eyes. Not because she was afraid of him personally, but because she suddenly understood that the dynamic between them had fundamentally changed. Tyler was no longer the young sergeant she had discarded for a better option. He was now married to one of the most powerful women in the Army, with access to influence and connections that made Colonel Sutherland's position seem modest by comparison. Tyler caught her eye, smiled politely, and nodded in acknowledgement before turning back to his conversation with Colonel Chun. He didn't need to approach her or create a scene. The message had been delivered simply by his presence. The game had changed. The players had evolved, and Tyler Brooks was no longer someone who could be dismissed. 2 years into their marriage, Major General Patricia Hayes Brooks received the call that would reshape Tyler's entire strategy. She had been selected for promotion to lieutenant general and assignment as Deputy Chief of Staff for Personnel, one of the Army's most influential positions, responsible for officer assignments, promotions, and career development across the entire service. "This changes everything," Patricia said as they celebrated privately in their Arlington home. "Personnel decisions at this level affect thousands of careers. The responsibility is extraordinary." Tyler understood the implications immediately. Together, they now had the power to shape destinies on a scale he had only dreamed of before. As Deputy Chief of Staff for Personnel, Patricia would have direct influence over the assignments and promotions of every senior officer in the Army, including Colonel Rick Sutherland. "When does the assignment begin?" 6 months. There will be a formal ceremony, probably at the Pentagon. All the senior leadership will attend. Patricia paused, studying Tyler's expression. "Including some people from our past that you might prefer not to see." Tyler had been waiting for this moment. The convergence of opportunity, position, and justice that would allow him to settle old accounts. His response, however, was measured and professional. "My personal feelings are irrelevant to your career, Patricia. This is an incredible honor and responsibility." Patricia moved closer, taking his hands in hers. "Tyler, I need to ask you something directly. I know about what happened at Fort Braxton, about the woman who broke your engagement. I've never pressed you for details because I believed you'd tell me when you were ready." Tyler met her gaze steadily. He had known this conversation would come eventually. Patricia was too intelligent and too connected to remain unaware of his history with Carla and Sutherland. "What do you want to know?" "I want to know if this assignment will create conflicts for you. If there are people in the Army that you can't work with objectively." Tyler considered his answer carefully. This was a moment that would define not just their marriage, but his entire future. Patricia was offering him the opportunity to remove himself from any decisions involving Sutherland, to maintain professional distance and avoid potential ethical complications. But Tyler had not spent 4 years building his position and reputation to step aside when the moment of opportunity finally arrived. "Patricia, what happened at Fort Braxton taught me something important about the difference between personal feelings and professional obligations. I learned that the Army is bigger than any individual relationship or grievance." Patricia nodded approvingly. "That's what I hoped you'd say." "However," Tyler continued, "I also learned that accountability matters. Officers who abuse their positions or betray trust need to face consequences. Not because of personal animosity, but because the institution requires it." "What are you suggesting?" Tyler walked to the window overlooking the Pentagon offices, choosing his words with the precision of a sniper selecting targets. "I'm suggesting that your new position will require you to evaluate the performance and suitability of every senior officer in the Army. Some of those evaluations will be straightforward. Good officers with clean records and strong performance. Others will be more complex." Patricia joined him at the window. "Complex how?" "Complex because some officers have advanced their careers through political connections rather than merit. Some have made decisions based on personal interest rather than Army values." Tyler paused, feeling the weight of their shared responsibility, knowing that the choices they made could reshape the institution itself. Some have created situations that, while not technically violations of regulation, demonstrate poor judgment and questionable character. Tyler could see Patricia processing this information, understanding the implications without requiring explicit details. "And you believe that your objectivity would be enhanced by your personal experience with such officers?" I believe that my experience has given me insights that could be valuable to your decision-making process. I understand how certain types of officers operate, what motivates them, and where their vulnerabilities lie. Patricia was quiet for several minutes, staring out at the river and weighing Tyler's words against her own observations and intelligence. There's going to be a formal military dinner next month, she finally said. A celebration of the Army's anniversary hosted by the Secretary. All the senior staff will attend along with their spouses. It will be the first major social event where I appear in my new role. Tyler felt a familiar cold excitement settling over him. The same feeling he'd experienced during tactical exercises when all the pieces of a complex operation finally aligned. Will Colonel Sutherland and his wife be attending? Almost certainly. The Strategic Planning Division has a prominent role in the ceremony. Patricia turned to face Tyler directly. Will that be a problem? Tyler smiled, and Patricia saw something in his expression that reminded her why she'd fallen in love with this quietly dangerous man. No, Tyler said. That won't be a problem at all. The Army Anniversary Gala at the Mayflower Hotel represented the pinnacle of military social events. It was a gathering of the Army's most senior leadership, their spouses, and selected government officials. Lieutenant General Patricia Hayes Brooks stood receiving congratulations on her new assignment, radiant in her dress uniform with its gleaming stars and ribbons earned through 2 decades of exemplary service. Tyler moved through the crowd with the practiced ease of someone who had mastered the art of military networking. His own uniform bore the insignia of a major, a rank he'd achieved through a combination of merit, political acumen, and Patricia's strategic guidance. More importantly, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who understood exactly where he stood in the room's complex hierarchy. The ballroom buzzed with conversations about strategy, personnel changes, and the political implications of recent Pentagon decisions. Tyler listened to it all, filing away intelligence about rivalries, alliances, and opportunities. But his primary focus was on 2 specific attendees who had not yet made their appearance. Major Brooks, called General William Morrison, the Army Chief of Staff. I wanted to congratulate you personally on your work with the Logistics Modernization Initiative. Your recommendations have been implemented across 3 major commands. Tyler accepted the praise with humility, looking forward to the real confrontation that was soon to unfold. Tyler accepted the praise with appropriate humility, but he was also aware that Morrison's public recognition served multiple purposes. It established Tyler's credibility within the senior leadership circle, reinforced Patricia's judgment in supporting his projects, and subtly reminded everyone present that the general's husband was a significant figure in his own right. Thank you, sir. I believe efficiency improvements benefit every level of the organization. Spoken like a true staff officer, Morrison said with approval. Your wife tells me you're considering advanced education, Harvard, MIT? I'm exploring options that would enhance my ability to contribute to Army modernization efforts. Tyler's answer was deliberately vague. He had learned that successful Pentagon operators never revealed their complete strategic plans. As Morrison moved on to other conversations, Tyler noticed a subtle shift in the room's energy. Colonel Rick Sutherland had arrived with his wife, and their entrance commanded immediate attention from the Strategic Planning Division officers and their social circle. Tyler observed them with clinical detachment, noting the changes that 4 years had wrought. Sutherland looked prosperous and confident, his uniform impeccable, and his bearing suggesting a man comfortable with his position and prospects. He moved through the crowd with the easy charm of someone who had mastered Pentagon politics. Carla had evolved even more dramatically. Her transformation from base contractor to senior military spouse was complete. Expensive gown, professional styling, and the practiced smile of someone who understood that her husband's career depended partly on her social performance. She worked the room with impressive skill, remembering names, asking about families, and demonstrating the kind of political instincts that made careers. Tyler felt no emotional reaction to seeing them. The young sergeant, who had been devastated by their betrayal, was gone, replaced by someone who understood that revenge was not about anger. It was about precision. "They're here," Patricia murmured, appearing at Tyler's side. She had noticed his observation of the new arrivals. "I see them. Are you ready for this?" Tyler turned to face his wife, struck once again by her remarkable presence. Patricia Hayes Brooks was everything Carla had pretended to value in a partner: brilliant, accomplished, and absolutely committed to excellence. But more than that, she was someone who understood that true partnerships were built on mutual respect rather than calculated advantage. "I've been ready for this moment for 4 years." Patricia studied his expression, recognizing the cold focus that had first attracted her attention during that urban combat exercise years earlier. "Just remember, we're here to represent the Army's values and traditions. Whatever happens tonight needs to reflect well on the institution we serve." Tyler gave a small, reassuring nod, fully aware that the real test of character and strategy was about to unfold. "Of course," Tyler replied. "I would never do anything to compromise your position or the Army's reputation." What Tyler didn't say, what he didn't need to say, was that the most devastating attacks were often the ones that appeared completely appropriate and professional. As the evening progressed, Tyler and Patricia moved through their social obligations with practiced efficiency. They discussed policy with congressional liaisons, strategy with fellow generals, and modernization initiatives with defense contractors. Yet all the while, Tyler was discreetly tracking Sutherland and Carla's movements, noting their conversations, and observing their interactions with key figures. During the formal dinner, Tyler found himself seated at a table with several strategic planning division officers and their spouses. The conversation ranged from recent Army operations to personnel changes to speculation about future assignments. "Rick's done exceptional work with the strategic planning reforms," commented Colonel David Chun, Sutherland's immediate supervisor. "His ability to synthesize complex operational requirements has impressed everyone at the Pentagon." Tyler listened with apparent interest while cataloging the subtle dynamics around the table. Sutherland clearly enjoyed his reputation as a rising star, but Tyler also detected the impatience and competitive instincts that Chun had mentioned years earlier. "The challenge with strategic planning," Tyler observed, "is balancing immediate operational needs with long-term institutional requirements. It requires exceptional judgment and collaborative skills." The comment was innocuous enough, but Tyler delivered it while making eye contact with Sutherland. For just a moment, he saw recognition flicker in the colonel's eyes. Not fear exactly, but awareness that Tyler Brooks was no longer someone who could be ignored or dismissed. Carla, seated directly across from Tyler, had been carefully avoiding looking in his direction all evening. But when he spoke, she glanced up reflexively, and Tyler saw something that satisfied him deeply. She looked genuinely uncomfortable for the first time since arriving. "Major Brooks," Sutherland said, his voice carrying just enough authority to remind everyone of their relative ranks. "I don't believe we've been formally introduced. I'm Rick Sutherland, Strategic Planning Division." Tyler stood and extended his hand with perfect military courtesy. "Tyler Brooks, assigned to the Deputy Chief of Staff for Personnel. It's a pleasure to meet you, sir. The handshake was firm, professional, and lasted exactly the appropriate duration, but Tyler made sure Sutherland felt the strength in his grip. Not a challenge, but a reminder that he was no longer dealing with the uncertain young sergeant from Fort Braxton. Brooks, Sutherland repeated, as if testing the name. Unusual to see an enlisted man rise so quickly through the ranks. The comment was clearly intended as a subtle insult, a reminder of Tyler's non-commissioned origins in a room full of West Point graduates and career officers. But Tyler had been anticipating this exact dynamic. "I've been fortunate to serve under exceptional leadership," Tyler replied, glancing toward Patricia. "Excellence tends to recognize excellence regardless of background." Several officers at the table nodded approvingly at Tyler's response, which managed to be both humble and confident, while subtly reminding everyone that he was married to one of the Army's most powerful generals. But Tyler wasn't finished. "Colonel, I understand you've been doing innovative work with strategic planning methodologies. I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts on how personnel assignments could better support operational objectives." It was a perfectly reasonable professional question, but Tyler had phrased it in a way that subtly established the context of their interaction. Tyler was now in a position to influence personnel decisions that could affect Sutherland's career. As Sutherland began explaining his strategic planning innovations, Tyler listened with apparent attention while planning the next phase of his carefully orchestrated evening. The real performance was just beginning. After dinner, as the formal program began with speeches from senior leadership, Tyler excused himself for a brief conversation with General Morrison. The discussion appeared to be routine, a junior officer seeking guidance from the Army's senior leadership, but Tyler had carefully orchestrated the timing and location to ensure maximum visibility. "Major Brooks," Morrison said, his voice carrying easily in the ballroom's acoustics. "Your wife tells me you've been working on personnel assignment optimization. That's exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need." "Thank you, sir. I believe there are significant efficiencies to be gained by better matching officer capabilities with strategic requirements." Their conversation attracted the attention of several nearby groups, including the Strategic Planning Division officers who had been clustered around Colonel Sutherland. Tyler noticed Carla watching from across the room, her expression growing increasingly concerned as she observed Tyler's easy interaction with the Army's most senior leadership. "I'd like you to brief the Joint Chiefs on your proposals next month," Morrison continued. "This kind of systematic approach to personnel management could transform how we handle officer development." Tyler accepted the assignment with appropriate humility, fully aware that Morrison's public endorsement had just elevated his profile significantly. More importantly, it had demonstrated to everyone present, including Sutherland and Carla, that Tyler Brooks was now someone with direct access to the Army's highest levels of decision-making. As the evening wore on, Tyler realized this moment had set in motion changes that would ripple through every corner of the institution he now helped to shape. As the formal program concluded and the reception resumed, Tyler found himself approached by a group of senior officers interested in discussing his personnel optimization proposals. The conversation was professional and substantive, but Tyler was also conscious that it was taking place in full view of the Strategic Planning Division personnel. "The challenge," Tyler explained to Colonel Jennifer Walsh, the Deputy Chief of Staff for Intelligence, "is that traditional assignment processes don't always account for the full spectrum of an officer's capabilities and limitations. We focus on technical qualifications without adequately considering leadership style, ethical standards, and long-term potential." Colonel Walsh nodded thoughtfully. "Are you suggesting we need better evaluation criteria?" I'm suggesting we need more comprehensive evaluation methods that look beyond surface qualifications. Tyler paused, then added, Some officers excel at presenting well, but struggle with the moral complexities of command. Others demonstrate exceptional character under pressure, but may lack political polish. It was at this moment that Patricia appeared at Tyler's side, her presence immediately commanding the attention of everyone in the group. I apologize for interrupting, she said with a smile, but I wanted to introduce my husband to some colleagues who are interested in his personnel management research. Tyler followed Patricia across the ballroom, noting how conversations paused and resumed as they passed. The sight of a 3-star general moving purposefully through the crowd with her husband inevitably attracted attention and speculation. They stopped at a group that included several colonels and their spouses, along with 2 brigadier generals. Tyler recognized some faces from Pentagon briefings, but what made Tyler's pulse quicken was the presence of Colonel Rick Sutherland and Carla, who had apparently been introduced to this circle just moments before. Everyone, Patricia announced, I'd like you to meet my husband, Major Tyler Brooks. Tyler's been developing innovative approaches to personnel assignment optimization that have caught the attention of the Joint Chiefs. Tyler acknowledged the introductions with professional courtesy, making sure to greet each person appropriately. When he reached Sutherland, he extended his hand with the same firm confidence he demonstrated earlier. Colonel Sutherland, we meet again. I hope you've enjoyed the evening. Indeed, Sutherland replied. Your wife has quite a reputation for strategic thinking. Patricia is extraordinary, Tyler agreed. I've learned more about effective leadership from her than from any other source. Tyler then turned to Carla, extending his hand with perfect courtesy. Mrs. Sutherland, it's a pleasure to meet you. Carla's handshake was brief and tentative, her eyes avoiding direct contact. Major Brooks. Actually, Tyler said with a slight smile, I believe we may have met before. Did you work at Fort Braxton several years ago? There was a moment of silence, attention shifting to Carla as she struggled for a composed response. I was stationed there as a sergeant. The question was asked innocently enough, but Tyler noticed how Carla's face went pale and how Sutherland's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Yes, I worked there briefly, Carla managed. Small world, Tyler commented. The Army community is more connected than people realize. Patricia, observing this exchange with the tactical awareness that had made her a successful general, recognized that something significant was happening. She didn't understand the complete context, but she trusted Tyler's judgment and positioning. Tyler has an exceptional memory for details, Patricia said. It's one of the qualities that makes him so effective at personnel analysis. Brigadier General Robert Martinez, one of Patricia's Pentagon colleagues, joined the conversation with obvious interest in Tyler's work. Major Brooks, I understand you've been developing new approaches to officer evaluation. That's timely. We're facing some challenging decisions about senior assignments. Tyler nodded professionally. General, I believe comprehensive evaluation requires looking at an officer's complete history, not just their most recent performance. Sometimes patterns emerge that aren't obvious from surface-level reviews. What kind of patterns? General Martinez asked. Ethical consistency under pressure. Decision-making processes when personal and professional interests conflict. The ability to maintain institutional loyalty when presented with opportunities for personal advancement. Tyler delivered this explanation while maintaining eye contact with General Martinez, but he was acutely aware of Sutherland's reaction. The colonel's jaw had tightened almost imperceptibly, and Tyler saw the moment when Sutherland began to understand that this conversation was not as random as it appeared. Those are complex qualities to evaluate objectively, Colonel Walsh observed. True, Tyler agreed, but they're often revealed through specific incidents or decisions. For example, how an officer handles situations where they must choose between personal benefit and institutional integrity. Those moments tend to define character more clearly than formal evaluations. Carla shifted uncomfortably, her gaze darting between Tyler and her husband. She was beginning to realize that Tyler's presence at this gathering was not coincidental, and that his casual questions about Fort Braxton had been anything but casual. "I'd be very interested in seeing your methodology," General Martinez said. "Personnel decisions at our level have enormous implications for Army effectiveness." "Of course, sir. I'd be happy to provide a detailed briefing." Tyler paused, then added, "I think you'll find that comprehensive background analysis can reveal insights that aren't apparent from standard evaluation processes." As the conversation continued, Tyler noticed Patricia watching him with growing understanding, realizing that her husband was not only making an impression, but also starting to shift the balance of influence within their world. She was beginning to recognize the careful orchestration behind what had appeared to be spontaneous interactions, and Tyler saw something in her expression that might have been admiration for the sophistication of his approach. But the evening's most important moment was still to come. At precisely 10:30 p.m., as the reception began to wind down and senior officers started making their departures, General Morrison approached the group where Tyler had been discussing personnel evaluation methodologies. "Ladies and gentlemen," Morrison announced, "before we conclude this evening, I have an announcement that I think you'll find interesting." The conversation quieted as the Army's most senior officer commanded attention. "As many of you know, we've been conducting a comprehensive review of strategic planning effectiveness across all major commands. This review has identified some significant opportunities for improvement, but it has also raised questions about current leadership assignments." Tyler felt Patricia tense slightly beside him, recognizing that Morrison's announcement was heading somewhere significant. "Major Brooks's personnel evaluation research has been instrumental in this review," Morrison continued. "His analysis has helped us understand how assignment decisions affect operational effectiveness and institutional integrity." Sutherland's face had gone completely neutral, the expression of a seasoned officer who sensed incoming fire, but couldn't yet identify the source or target. "Based on this comprehensive analysis," Morrison said, "we've made some decisions about senior assignments that will be announced next week. However, I wanted to give our strategic planning division colleagues advanced notice of changes that will affect their operations." Tyler remained perfectly composed, but internally he was experiencing the cold satisfaction of a long-planned operation reaching its culmination. "Colonel Sutherland," Morrison said, turning to face him directly, "you'll be receiving new assignment orders on Monday. We're transferring you to Fort Leonard Wood as Deputy Chief of Staff for a Combat Engineer Brigade." The announcement hit the group like a physical blow. Fort Leonard Wood was a significant command, but it was also geographically isolated and operationally limited compared to Pentagon assignments. More importantly, it represented a clear step backward from Sutherland's current trajectory toward general rank. "Sir," Sutherland managed, "may I ask what prompted this decision?" Morrison's expression remained professional but firm. "Our analysis indicated that the Strategic Planning Division would benefit from leadership with different capabilities and experience. Your replacement will be announced shortly." Tyler noticed Carla gripping her husband's arm, her face reflecting the dawning realization that their carefully constructed life was about to be dismantled. "General Morrison," Patricia interjected smoothly, her tone gracious and supportive. Would it be appropriate to mention Colonel Sutherland's replacement this evening? Morrison smiled, clearly pleased with the opportunity to deliver the evening's final revelation. Actually, yes. The new Strategic Planning Division commander will be Colonel Patricia Hayes Brooks, effective immediately upon her promotion to Brigadier General. The silence that followed Morrison's announcement was profound. Tyler felt Patricia's hand find his, squeezing gently as she absorbed the implications of her unexpected promotion and new assignment. But Tyler's attention was focused on Sutherland and Carla's reactions. The colonel's face had gone completely pale as he processed the full scope of what had just occurred. Not only was he being transferred to a lesser assignment, but he was being replaced by Tyler's wife, a woman who would now outrank him significantly and control strategic planning for the entire army. Carla's reaction was even more dramatic. She looked as if she might faint, her carefully maintained composure cracking as she understood that the power dynamic she had calculated so carefully 4 years earlier had been completely inverted. "Congratulations, General Hayes Brooks," Morrison said to Patricia. "Your promotion ceremony will be held next week, followed immediately by your assumption of command." Patricia accepted the congratulations with appropriate grace, but Tyler could see her mind working rapidly to understand the full context of what had just transpired. As the group began to disperse with various officers offering congratulations to Patricia and awkward farewells to Sutherland, Tyler found himself standing face to face with his former commanding officer. "Congratulations on your wife's promotion," Sutherland said, his voice carefully controlled. "Thank you, Colonel. I'm sure you'll find Fort Leonard Wood an interesting assignment. Combat engineering is vital to Army operations." Sutherland studied Tyler's expression, searching for some indication of the calculated vengeance that had just been executed with surgical precision. "You know," Sutherland said quietly, "I always knew there was something different about you, even back at Fort Braxton." Tyler smiled, not with triumph or malice, but with the cold satisfaction of a professional who had successfully completed a complex mission. "The Army teaches us that actions have consequences, Colonel. Sometimes those consequences take years to manifest, but they're always inevitable." Tyler extended his hand one final time, and Sutherland shook it with the recognition of a defeated opponent, acknowledging superior strategy. As Sutherland and Carla made their way toward the exit, Tyler heard Carla's voice rising in barely controlled panic. "Rick, how did this happen? How did we not see this coming?" Sutherland's response was too quiet to hear, but Tyler didn't need to. He knew exactly what the colonel was thinking. The true cost of ambition and the power of patience sharpened by experience. They had dismissed Tyler Brooks as an obstacle that could be easily removed, never understanding that they were dealing with someone who viewed setbacks as intelligence and patience as a weapon. Patricia appeared at Tyler's side as they watched their former adversaries leave the ballroom. "When did you plan all this?" she asked quietly. "I didn't plan it," Tyler replied truthfully. "I just positioned myself to recognize opportunities when they presented themselves." Patricia studied her husband's profile, understanding for the first time the full extent of his capabilities and the depth of his commitment to settling old accounts. "You never told me the complete story about Fort Braxton." "You never needed to know the complete story. You needed to know that I was completely loyal to you and to our mission." As they walked toward their car, Patricia reflected on the evening's events and her husband's role in orchestrating them. She had always known Tyler was exceptional, but tonight had revealed the existence of a long-term strategy that was both brilliant and ruthless. "Are you satisfied now?" she asked. Tyler considered the question, as they stood on the hotel steps looking out over Washington, D.C., the city where power was earned, wielded, and lost through the careful application of patience and precision. Satisfaction isn't the right word, Tyler said. Finally, justice is more accurate. Some betrayals require accountability, even if that accountability takes years to achieve. Patricia nodded, recognizing the truth in her husband's words and the completeness of his victory. Colonel Rick Sutherland and his wife Carla would soon discover that Fort Leonard Wood was just the beginning of their exile from the circles of power they had worked so hard to enter. Tyler's influence over personnel assignments would ensure that Sutherland's career stagnated in progressively less significant positions, while Carla learned that military social hierarchies could be as unforgiving as battlefield tactics. But as Tyler and Patricia drove home through the streets of Arlington, Tyler felt no need to gloat or celebrate. The young sergeant who had been humiliated and discarded was gone, replaced by someone who understood that true power lay not in revenge, but in the patient construction of unstoppable strategic advantages. The game was over. Tyler Brooks had won completely and permanently, and unlike his enemies, he would never forget the lessons that victory had taught him about loyalty, patience, and the price of betrayal. 6 months later, Brigadier General Patricia Hayes Brooks hosted her first strategic planning conference as division commander. The gathering brought together the Army's most innovative thinkers to discuss modernization, efficiency, and future operational requirements. Major Tyler Brooks presented his comprehensive personnel optimization system to an audience of generals, colonels, and senior Pentagon officials, marking the start of a new era shaped by hard-earned wisdom and relentless ambition. His presentation was met with widespread acclaim and immediate approval for service-wide implementation. During the conference break, Tyler received a text message from an unknown number. "You won. I hope you're happy." Tyler deleted the message without responding. He had no interest in communicating with Carla Sutherland, who was now living on a combat engineering base in Missouri, watching her husband's career slowly dissolve under the weight of systematic professional isolation. Tyler Brooks had learned something that his father would have been proud of. The strongest soldiers were not those who fought the loudest battles, but those who planned the longest campaigns and executed them with patience, precision, and absolutely no mercy for those who betrayed them. The war was over. Victory was complete. And Tyler had never been more certain that he had chosen the right path to power, justice, and permanent security.